And so we switched over and we started doing a case study on Blackfoot influences, because we thought, well, maybe we need to make the point that what the elders have to say is really important. And we don't know how many people have come through Blackfoot communities, the blood community, Siksika, Bigani. How many people have come through and got PhDs and MAs after spending 6 weeks with our elders and going back and writing it up? And so we thought, well, we should study what has been the Blackfoot influence on people that have come into the community, Western scholars. Not only the professional influences, but how that experience has changed them personally, because they, you know, the two worlds aren't, the two sides of life aren't separate. You'll see with what we have to say about Maslow today, I think that it was that personal impact that really sent him in some of the direction that he went. We had heard about this story about Maslow in the community for years. I think it's probably, you know, it's been retained ever since Maslow came out to Siksika, which was in 1938, the summer of 1938. And was it in the 80s? At St. Paul's Treatment Center on the Blood Reserve, there was a group there that were using Maslow's hierarchy of needs in their counseling with their clients and presenting it as a Blackfoot model. And some clients believed it, some didn't. But what we had heard was that Maslow's hierarchy of needs had been influenced by Blackfoot teepee designs. And that was the sum of the story that we really heard when we started our study. And then we began trying to flesh out that story. And we went to all kinds of resources to do it. We asked around the community, of course. We went to the archives to try to find Maslow's notes and papers. That led us to the University of Akron, Ohio, where the archives of the history of American psychology is, and all of Maslow's effects. His papers are stored. We read Maslow's papers, of course. Eventually we found a woman named Jane Richardson Hanks, who had come with Maslow in 1938 to Siksika, who was a co-researcher with him. And she was just turning 100 years old a couple of years ago when we met her, when we talked to her, I should say. And she was still very lucid, and she still remembered Maslow well, although she didn't have a great high opinion of him. She told us some great stories. We put all of this together, and so this is what ends up comprising the story we're going to tell you. But moreover, we can assume some things. I think you'll see where our assumptions are based on our experiences in the community, the stories we heard versus how we know that things are, and what we can suspect some of Maslow's experiences might have been. So, Abraham Maslow, we could have started this story a lot of different places, but a good place to start it is at these colloquias. He was attending in the mid-1930s in New York City with Ruth Benedict. Ruth Benedict was running the colloquias. Maslow had gone to school in Wisconsin, do his graduate training, and he got a job at Brooklyn College in New York, and was very excited to be in New York because the who's who of academia in the mid-1930s was in New York, at least the who's who of the people that he had been reading and that he really respected, and he was getting to meet these people face to face and bounce ideas off of them. And he went into, he got into this colloquia. Ruth Benedict was one of these academics that Maslow had a high opinion of. And he began going into her classes to kind of audit, and then eventually befriended her and got invited into this colloquia. And he came into the colloquia with some ideas, and in particular, he had an idea about social psychology that he was proposing was a human universe, in fact, a universal among primates. That idea was that he believed all societies had hierarchical structures to them, and that those hierarchies were put in place and kept in place and maintained by acts of aggression and competitive behaviors and such. And he came up with this idea when he was in graduate school. We're challenged today to tell this story in this much time. We normally take 2 days, a day and a half to tell this story. So I'm going to skip some of these influences. I'm sure some of you know what these are about. But a couple of really important ones. When Maslow was going through graduate training, he was working under Harry Harlow in Wisconsin, and he was studying primates. And 2 things came out of that study that were really important for his later development and for the idea that he had about societies and hierarchies and competitiveness and dominance and submission. One of the things that he noticed was that if you feed a monkey his normal diet, day after day after day after day, they'll get to a point where they'll just eat enough to fill up on their diet. They'll just eat what they need to be full, and then they'll leave their food alone. They won't eat the rest of it. But if you introduce something new, a treat of some kind, something that they don't normally have in their diet, suddenly they'll have an appetite again and they'll eat it. That he called a salient appetite. This comes into play later, how much this, he published this, and this was kind of his first publication that made any impact, was this idea of the salient appetite, that you have base needs. When you've completed those, there are still needs above those. The other thing that he noticed with the primates working with Harlow was that there was hierarchies in primate societies, and those hierarchies were put in place and kept in place by aggression, particularly rape scenarios, where the dominant member of the group, if challenged, if looked in the eye or such, would aggressively rape the others to keep them in a position of submission. And so you saw monkeys in a particular group that were on the lower end of the hierarchy, acting very submissive, and those that were at the upper end, the dominant end of this group, being very confident and, if challenged, very aggressive. And so this he published, and this was his second kind of big publication, even as a graduate student. And he thought to himself, well, if this happens with primates, does it happen with human beings? And he created an inventory, the social personality inventory, which is still used today somewhat. And this was a questionnaire. And this questionnaire went through kind of 2 series of questions. The first part of these questions would ask things that would lead him to be able to rate somebody's ego security. They would ask questions like, do you feel like you're smarter than others that are your friends, or do you feel like you're better than your so-and-so? And by the answers on those questions, he kind of could rate whether someone was very ego secure or not, right? How they felt about themselves. The second part of that questionnaire went into very personal attributes of a person's life, their sex life, went into very detailed kind of personal questions.